The following program is a Town of Colony television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Happy holidays. I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Celebrating the human spirit.
And we're storytellers. And we're all about storytelling and kind of learning more about the ways stories get told in our lives. Mm-hmm. And we love to listen to stories. And Kate and I are both producing storytelling programs here and there. So we like to kind of organize stories. And we're here to spend some time with you sharing the idea of stories. Now, I always ask you this question, and I'm always impressed. What's the most interesting thing you've been doing lately?
Well, in preparation for being the professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts at Harry Potter Day at the Schenectady County Library just before Halloween, I worked up the story, the folktale, Kate Crackernuts.
Kate Crackernuts.
And there's a prince, well, Kate Crackernuts' stepsister has had her head changed into a sheep's head. Kate's mother was a little jealous of how pretty she was. So Kate and she left before the mother did something else and are off to try to find out a cure for this. And in the meantime, they come across a kingdom where the prince sleeps all day and it's just getting weaker and weaker. And Kate says that she will sit with him and hoping to get the bushel of gold. So I practiced this up at the open mic at Saratoga. And the people there were so responsive. I put in participation because this was going to be like a 10-year-old audience at the library. So at the last stroke of midnight, bong! And they picked right up on that. The prince got up, walked to the stable, got on a horse, Kate jumped behind him, and off they went.
Very.
And then they got to they passed the nut grove, and she had picked nuts and put them in her pockets. An important plot point later on. And they got to a green hill, an open green hill, and let the prince and his horse in, and the lady behind him too. And doors appeared, squeak, and in they went, squeak. They're actually a little more responsive than the kids.
Well, your squeak was pretty good, but it's not gonna ever match the horse. The riding horse.
It's you're sliced down. Yes.
Well,
so it's a little harder when you're standing up.
And it went really well?
Yes. In both places it went very well.
Well, I can't top that one. I can't even do that. So, but I have decided.
But you can sing better than I do. So.
Occasionally I do. But I've got a program I have to do for a fellowship breakfast at church. And you know how you're going through the files of all the things that you can tell. And there's one there, and it's the master of the calculated risk. And that's General Jimmy Doolittle, my distant cousin, who took bombers off of the carrier Wasp and bombed Tokyo in April of 1942, soon after Pearl Harbor. And it was a risky thing to do. Some people thought it was a suicide mission, but he was such a wound-tight engineer that he'd figured out a lot of stuff, like where they were going to ditch their planes when they ran out of gas in China and things. And all but 8 flyers made it back, and 2 were back after the war because they were in POW camps the whole time. But only 6 actually died in the raid. And that's the whole story in a way of what happens to them when they get back. But so that's going to be my fellowship program, and it jumped out of me off of the file saying, "Oh, that story, I remember that." So, and the breakfast is on December 7th.
Okay.
Pearl Harbor Day, and even though he wasn't at Pearl Harbor,
Right,
you know.
it was the predecessor to it.
So our stories are with us. One of the nice things about a story is that they tend to stay with you, and they come back and greet you, so that now that you've reestablished the story with the princess and the...
Well, this was actually my first time through Cake Cracker Nuts. I mean, I knew the story. I had read the story, too.
But you never told the story.
I had never told the story.
Wow.
And I did kind of cut out the beginning of it took her 3 times for the sheep's head to, but, you know, that I went right to the meat of it, where...
So I stand corrected. Sometimes when you're looking for inspiration, you find the right story to tell, and it can involve baskets of gold. It's really...
Yes. And you don't have, your heroine doesn't have to have the same first name that you do. But that was another thing that I liked.
Well, one of the things we like to do with our time with you guys as the viewers is to kind of introduce you to other regional storytellers, people who are doing interesting things with the world of story, with word and sometimes with song. And we have a really special person here who's doing a lot of interesting things. Eileen Mack is with us. And Eileen Mack has been a storyteller about 10, 15 years?
Well, I joined the guild when I moved to the area.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many years ago that was, but you know, in teaching and speech therapy and nursery school and, you know, storytelling, you know, it's just there. It's part of what you do.
It's kind of what you do. Yeah. Well, you've been doing it for now, and professionally, you were a teacher and you were a speech therapist, but you grew up around here, didn't you?
I grew up in Ballston Lake, New York.
Ballston Lake, home of Carney's Tavern.
That's right, and that actually used to belong to my grandfather.
Is that right?
It was the Ballston Lake Hotel. And my father was the youngest of 7 children, and all his older siblings were born in that hotel.
Really?
But when he was born, his mother and his eldest sister, Mary, who was like 17 at the time, got on the trolley, which was right next to their train tracks in Ballston Lake, took the trolley down to Schenectady, walked up the hill to the hospital, and that's where my father was born.
You know, sometimes you just don't know when to expect a good story.
I'm going, I was in labor and my husband drove over the Rexford Bridge faster than he has ever done before or since. It was after midnight, so there really wasn't any traffic. And I was dropped off at the door, hopping a trolley and then walking up a hill.
Yes, for your 7th child.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm the 5th child, and I was born in the front seat of a '38 Plymouth, 4 blocks shy of Samaritan Hospital in Troy.
And you've never told me that before?
I'm sorry. It's one of my great stories.
And when have you heard where Fran Yardley was born? She was born in a woody.
In a woody?
Yes.
Like, I can't say I was born in a woody.
Right. A station wagon with wood panels.
Old Ford Woody, yep.
Yes, again.
Those were beautiful.
Not
the best place to have
on the way to the hospital.
I didn't know I had that in common with Janine. We were both in the cars.
Fran Yardley.
Fran Yardley. Oh.
Yeah. I don't know anything about Janine Laverty's birth. But I guess we could do a whole program on
childbirth stories.
Well, it goes back to kind of the setting of growing up, because, you know, Ballston Lake is a charming little village, and, you know, that must have been a fun place to kind of start out in terms of doing stuff.
Well, it was. Like, I mean, we were talking about Halloween, and Halloween, you know, we often made our own costumes, or once in a while I'd get one of the ones in those awful boxes, you know. And then off you'd go out the door, up and through the Buell and down through the village, and we'd always go to Muriel Ketchum's house. Muriel, you're listening? And we thought for sure, every year we'd think for sure she wouldn't be able to recognize 4 little girls, but of course she always knew who we were. And then we'd go to the firehouse because they always had a Halloween party,
That's right.
and you'd have a parade, and they'd serve cider and donuts. And it was about once a year that you would get that cider and donuts, so it was special. But I wish I knew more about when my dad was growing up there, because that would be a great story, because he had the run of the village, and it was before the roads were paved. They used to take their sleds up by what's now called Stevens Elementary School, and they would start sledding down there, come down Lake Hill, and make the right go down Main Street.
Yeah, wow. That's a good run.
And he'd go swimming in Ballston Lake, he'd go swimming in Kimball's Pond. All his sisters, I think all of his sisters, maybe not Mary, swam the length of the lake. Dad was in the water swimming, and somebody was in, a canoe going along with them, but
They swam the length of the lake.
he got out. But his dog Shep was running along shore, keeping track of him.
You got some stories there.
Well, yeah, and there's an this week was Armistice Day, and when Armistice Day happened, he was about 4 years old. And it takes a little while for the news to get from Europe over to here and whatever, but by the time it got to Ballston Lake, I mean, everybody was cheering, and the kids were out in the street, and they grabbed my dad, put him in the front of a coal scuttle, gave him a little, I think a white flag to wave, probably a stick with a rag on it, and they went up and down the street of Main Street, yelling and hooting and hollering, and my dad was at the head of the parade with all the kids following.
There you go.
Just the right age to fit in that coal scuttle. Get moved along.
See, I was just connecting with Carney's Tavern.
Well, and Carney's Tavern itself has a great history, because the McDonoughs owned it when I was a kid, and then Rosemary and Bob Carney owned it, and great story about their bartender, Danny Ward, who was like a legend. When Danny died way too young, but he had lots. He too was completely devoted to Ballston Lake. He was like my dad. You didn't need to go anywhere else because you had Ballston Lake, and they still honor Danny.
With the picnic.
There's a run every year in his name, and the scoreboard at the high school is in his name. So yeah, it's Ballston Lake Hotel, McDonough's, Carney's Tavern, and now a very nice young couple is running it, and it's so good to have a place to go and have community and have good food. So thanks, Carney's.
Yep. One of the things that our listeners might be interested is you've, in addition to telling a variety of stories, but you've developed a real art in kind of I want to say, kind of famous women, and kind of being able to do a one-woman show about interesting people, and it's been
with songs
with
involved.
songs involved too. It's right. I remember the first time I heard you do the Jeannie Robert Foster, that I didn't expect you to start singing, and you were behind me, and I was in the back of the presentation area at the Irish Museum, and you started to sing, and I thought the angels were right with us.
Well, when you don't play an instrument well enough to accompany yourself, because when you try to do that, it's like shooting yourself in the foot. You have to, just say, well, do it a cappella. You do I've sung the national anthem many times. I even sang it for Hillary Clinton once, out in Altona, New York. Who ever heard of Altona, New York? But it's a little tiny village northeast of Plattsburgh, but it was the only place that could hold 750 people. This was when she was our state senator. So anyway, you kind of learn to just do it a cappella. And I wish I had more women that I've done, but I've just not been ambitious enough. So I have Jean Robert Foster, whom I love, and I love her stories. And the fact that she grew up in the Adirondacks. So for some reason, I wanted to tell stories at the Saratoga National Battlefield, the historic battlefield. Oh, because I had a friend who was working there as a park.
Docent or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was, you couldn't just go and tell stories there. You had to have it somehow relate. So I started looking into Catherine Schuyler, but I couldn't find much on Catherine Schuyler. So then I began looking into Elizabeth Schuyler.
And Catherine
Hamilton.
Schuyler was
she was
her
married
mother.
to Philip Schuyler.
Philip Schuyler. She was a Van Rensselaer.
Yes.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah.
An heiress.
Yes, an heiress for sure. So, so I started looking into Elizabeth, and I can't remember what year, but Story Circle of the Capital Districts, maybe you can, Capital District, produces something called word plays.
Right. I remember, and that was when we were upstairs in the
At
Fenimore
Proctor's.
room, because I remember, for some
Proctor's.
reason, I remember seeing you, I can see you, and then the glass overlooking the atrium below.
So I tested out part of the story of Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton, which I call the naming ceremony. When she was about 12 years old, she got adopted by the people of the Longhouse as a way to further connect the League of Six Nations with the English and
yeah.
with the family of Philip Schuyler, because he, for a long time, had a good relationship, had created a good relationship with the native peoples from his trading days, and that served well, for the military conflicts too. So then it was like, well, then what do I do with it? Well, I think I wrote it probably many, many pages, and it was too long to put into one show that anybody would want to sit through. It would have to have an intermission and people with, ears of iron to listen to the same voice for two things. So I ended up, because time was I ended up just creating the program. Maybe someday I'll do the second part. I wanted to do about her life after Hamilton died, because he died in 1804 and she died in 1854.
Whoa.
So she lived another 50 years. And while we're pretty sure that we know she missed him and loved him, despite everything and because of everything, but she went on and had her own life. And so I kind of really wanted people to know that. But I ended up, just the way I've been doing the program, is just pretty much talking about her early years, starting with that naming ceremony, and then talking about the people that came to visit, and that ventured to the Coes Falls, and up until she, meets Hamilton and they get married.
So, and this is a one-woman show that you do in concert with the musicians of Malwick. So there is music in this that's not a cappella.
Right. Well, when I do it with them, when I've done it before on my own, and it's a little different. But when I was looking for music to do, I went to Anne Marie Barker Schwartz. I had met her in a bar class. It's like an exercise class.
Okay,
I thought we were back in Clary's again. I'm sorry.
The party, Joe.
Woke me right up again.
So, and then I bumped into her one time when she was out. She's also a ballroom dancer, and she and her husband Fred were doing a showcase at a cotillion dance event. And so I went up to say hi to her, because I hadn't seen her since our fitness class. And so when I was looking for music to go with this from the late 1700s, early 1800s, I went and I asked to meet with her. And she got interested in the project, and this was a long time ago, but she said, well, maybe someday we can do it with the musicians of Malwick. And Anne Marie apparently, if you look at the schedule of events that the musicians of Malwick is doing, there are no two things that are ever the same.
Right.
I mean, they just did a ghost story program.
Yeah.
If Anne Marie gets an idea, she not only has the imagination to go with it, but the how to make it happen. So yes, I've been able to been working with Anne Marie Barker Schwartz, Norman Thibodeau, and Sten Isaacson. And when I sing, I'm not just singing like, the folk song. Now I'm singing Handel's Where'er You Walk, and a song by the first American composer, Francis Hopkinson. You may have heard of William Billings. He did a lot of early choral music, so
Yeah.
he's considered the first choral music composer. But Francis Hopkinson wrote songs that people just sang. So Anne Marie suggested this song, and it's perfect. It's called My Love Is Gone to Sea. Anyway, so I get to sing with a violin, a classical guitar, and a flute.
Whoa.
And I'm very impressed.
No piano or bass.
That's amazing. You know what? You were at the mansion, and then you were
That's the Schuyler Mansion in Albany.
In Albany, and then you were recently, because I couldn't get there. You were at SCC.
We did it at Schenectady County Community College
okay.
because they teach there.
Yeah.
But I had a friend come down from North Creek, Evelyn Green. She's seen the Gene Robert Foster show, and her father was Paul Schaefer, the conservationist and the home builder. And so she's seen the Gene Robert Foster show many times, but she came all the way down for that. So that was very nice. You know, it's great to tell the stories and sing the songs, but when you go out and do these events, sometimes the best part is like seeing who comes and getting to talk with people afterward, and that's a lovely part of it.
I think I went to high school with her sister. I think I should bring that up. That's another whole story.
Yeah, see, so many
No
things are
acapella.
connected.
Right. Do you have a story? Do you want to tell us? You want to do a part of Elizabeth? What would you like to do?
What I thought today was I come across two ideas. One is the idea of awe. And I thought I might toss that out and see what your thoughts are about awe and experiencing it, because not that my stories are going to fill you with awe, but just somebody was saying the other day, well, if you can't name the emotion, you can't have that emotion. And I think that we really just haven't quite sorted out, like the love, like shale. Like there are so many layers, and maybe there are some things and emotions that we just really haven't quite pinpointed. But the one about awe, because I read this article about it, I don't know, when I saved the article and I came across it when I was getting ready to come today. And awe, the opportunity to have awe is so good for us that it's an emotion that helps our brain and helps our being. So I don't know, have you had any awesome experiences lately?
Well, it's there's a segue to my friend Harlan Ratmeyer, who's the chaplain at Albany Med. He gets 3 or 4 shots at medical students. And one of the first things he does is he talks with them about awe. And he asks them to describe some time when they've been awed by something and what it was. And then he reverses it and says that patients and staff will begin to regard them with awe because they're physicians. And that recognizing awe and being able to kind of reciprocate an emotion that leaves your ability to be the doctor, but also gives you the opportunity to be the caregiver. And it's focused on awe and also acquiring some humility. And it's the juxtaposition of those two things. And I can't do it the way he does that workshop, but it's the kind of thing that those young professionals remember. And I think that's an important part of it.
So even though people treat you like you can walk on water, you must keep in mind that you really can't. And it's,
That's right.
And it's best for their care that you remember that.
Right, and that you must appear to be that you're walking on water. I mean that there's a sense of confidence about that. But it's in this whole dynamic of being able to experience awe and realize that in a way you might be the source of it for people. And I've never had that problem with myself, being the source of awe for other people. But
I think you probably underestimate that, don't you think so, Kate?
Well,
And you too, with your storytelling. It can be awe-inspiring. It really
I think sacred stories fall into that, and it's not necessarily, by sacred stories, I don't necessarily mean it about any particular religion, but it's a story that you want to say amen to, meaning, yes, this is the way it should always be. Yes, this is right, this is true. But when you said all, what first came to mind was I saw two photographs juxtaposed. Some Facebook friend, actually several have sent them, and one was a photograph of a Gothic cathedral, and the columns were bathed in either dawn or sunset light, that golden light that comes at the beginning, at the end of the days. And then right next to it was displayed a grove of trees with a path through it, not a road, but a path through it. And they looked remarkably similar, again with that same golden light. And that reminded me of Peggy Ayers' song about we learn to dance from the movement of trees, and that those trees perhaps inspired the architects of the Gothic cathedrals.
Right,
So when it was like the sight of them, even though it wasn't very big on my screen, was
you got it.
I got it.
Well, you think about it, that people probably were out in the cathedral of trees, holding sacred ceremonies or giving thanks or whatever. So just man imitating nature. Well, one of the times that I realized I was feeling awe was when I was at the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland. I heard of the Cliffs of Moher. Big deal. You've probably seen pictures on TV or in a magazine or something. But when I got there, it was amazing because the wind is coming fully across the Atlantic Ocean. It's blowing you. You have to walk bent over, and the waves are crashing and the surf's coming up, creating rainbows along the edge of the cliffs, and the birds are swirling in and out of the crashing waves, and I felt awe. So I was trying to figure out how I was gonna get that to link with what my stories are, but I think I just figured it out. Because talking about the Cliffs of Moher, it was the wind was a huge part of that experience. So today I have several stories that involve the wind. So not just hot air, but wind. So
Go.
Go.
right, okay. So you may have heard this story before, especially if you have children or grandchildren in a preschool program or early elementary school, because it's one that you're likely to find there. One day, a little boy had gone through his puzzles, was tired of building with his blocks, and was driving his mother crazy, asking her, "What can I do? What can I do?" And finally, he wore the mother down. She sighed. She said, "All right, I have a task for you. You need to go and find a little red house with no doors, no windows, a chimney, and a star inside." "Oh, Mom, where am I going to find anything like that?" She said, "You are telling me how bored you are. You've done everything that you wanted to do in this house, and unless you want to start helping with the dishes and sweep the floor, you need to go find that little red house with no doors, no windows, a chimney, and a star inside." Okay, so off he went down the road, not knowing really what to expect. It was a kind of a breezy day, and he's kicking the dirt under his feet as he goes along, and he came to his neighbor, a little girl. He thought, well, maybe she would know. So he asked his little friend, "Hi." And she greeted him back, "Hi. I'm looking for something." "Well, what are you looking for? Maybe I've got it." Well, his eyes, ears perked up at that. Maybe she did. "I'm looking for a little red house with no doors, no windows, a chimney, and a star inside. The little girl thought. She looked around her yard. She thought what was in her toy chest. I don't have anything like that, she said. Sorry. Well, that's okay. Thanks for thinking about it. And off he went down the road, taking a stick, dragging it in the sand as he went along, till he came to the farmer. Now, farmers know a lot. They work 7 days a week. They're looking out in the world at what's going on all the time. Maybe this farmer would know. So he went up to the farmer and he said, "Good morning, farmer." "Good morning, boy. How are you doing today?" "I'm trying to find something." "But what are you trying to find?" "I'm trying to find a little red house with no doors, no windows, a chimney, and a star inside." Well, farmer pushed his hat back on his head, scratched his head, thought about it. That's red, but it has doors. Well, that has doors, but I'm sorry, little fella. I don't think I can help you today. "Okay, thank you. Why don't you go down the road and ask Granny? She's out on the porch this morning. I saw her out there, and maybe she can help you out." So he went skipping down the road, thinking maybe Granny could help him. And he skipped and whistled along until he came to Granny, and there she was sitting on the porch. He went up the path to the steps. "Good morning, Granny." "Eh? Good morning, Granny." "Oh, good morning, Sonny. Can I help you today?" "Yes, Granny, you can," he said as loud as he could. "Well, that's good. I'm happy to help." And her little face was as wizened and wrinkled as a walnut, and you knew she had years and years of wisdom in her head and in her heart. So the little boy looked at her and said, "I'm trying to find a little red house with no doors, no windows, a chimney, and a star inside." Granny pondered that over. She looked this way, she looked that way. She closed her eyes and thought deep into her memories. "I don't know, little boy, but I have an idea. I think that if you follow the wind across the way to the orchard, the wind can help you out." "The wind? Okay, Granny," he said. And off he went down the path and across the road and into the orchard. And the wind was blowing. And when the wind blows, you know, the leaves get ruffled. And he said to the wind, "Wind, do you know where I can find a little red..." Plop. Off of that apple tree fell a red apple. She thinks the wind might know the answer. The wind knocked this apple down and he picked it up. Well, it was little, it was red. It had no doors. It had no windows. The stem could be a chimney. But I don't know if there's a star inside. Well, stuck the apple in his pocket and made a beeline for back home. "Mom, Mom, Mom!" "Oh, you're back." "Mom, I think I found it. I think I found it." "Found what?" "Mom." "Oh, okay. Mom, I found it. It's a little red house with no doors, no windows, a chimney, but I don't know if there's a star inside." "I know," said the mother. She took the apple, polished it up, set it on a plate, grabbed a knife, took the stem so it was laying on its side, and she cut the apple in half and opened it up and showed him the two halves of the apple. And inside, there was a star on each side. And that's the story of the little boy with the little red house.
Thank you.
And the wind held all the answers.
And the wind had all the answers.
Yes. And you made that delicious little windy noise when he came back sooner than his mother had hoped for.
Right.
That little you're back. I don't know if I did that as well as you did, but I remember making that sound.
Oh, here you are again.
Oh, nap's over, huh?
Oh, and it's such a great story too. I mean, and we've all been the little boy and the little girl at one point in time. Not to be sexist, but I mean, you guys could go out and get the apples too. But I mean, it's just you've been on that little kind of quest, and you did the characters pretty well too.
Yes, yeah, the farmer
was good.
just a little change in your voice, but the language, and pushed his hat back. Oh yeah. That's what they do.
Well, you try to picture these things in your head, but I still don't think that I always give myself enough permission to do. That's why I feel like I'm a novice storyteller.
Well, but it's not so much permission. In the art of telling the story, and it worked for me. You generate the vision of the little kid and the farmer and the granny, and so you're actually gifting people the idea of making their own story, because everybody kind of travels their own route with the little boy, and so I think you're right on. I think you do a pretty good job of generating those images for people.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Elizabeth Ellis always says, high five your story. Excuse me. Which means add the 5 senses.
Add the 5 senses.
Right. And so she said that's a way to get people right there. So she encourages not to rush through the plot, but adding. And I just recently worked on a story with her, and an older woman and a young woman were sitting together outside on a porch, and I went, oh, and I forgot the breeze and the flowers and the just a phrase, not even a whole sentence, can just sort of add color to the picture. Well, of course, sight is we usually overemphasize that, but sound and touch we rarely touch on. But and smells.
And
smells
aroma.
are very evocative. So that's. But we need to move along. We've been having wonderful chats. There aren't that many storytelling events in December, But on December 2nd, there is the First Monday Tales and Stuff, now at the First Reformed Church's Poling Chapel, with Stories of the Season, Sweet and Clear, with Mary Murphy and Barbara Palumbo.
And that's going to be a good night. They're eagerly anticipating that the storytellers. I think it's going to be a fun night, and they're wonderful. And there's an opportunity if you want to come and tell your own story or sing your own song. And it's one of the few places where we actually let you read a story or a poem. And our last group, we had a couple of guys from the writers group there, and they read some stories. So it's cool.
And then the following week, something's wrong with these dates. But you will see the right things on your screen. I will fix them before this goes to your TV station. If December 2nd is a Monday, December 9th is not a Tuesday. So something's wrong there. But sometime in that second week of December will be Interfaith Story Circle, Stories of Our Ancestors and the Land. 7 to 9 at Congregation Berith Shalom in Troy, and the featured teller is Leah Penniman. And you can find out more at their website, withourvoice.org/IFSC, Interfaith Story Circle. Then on Wednesday, December 18th, will be our guild meeting, Story Circle of the Capital District, where people can share works in progress, not read, but they can be rough. It can be just sort of an idea that you want to brainstorm and see I've come up with 3 different ways of approaching this, and can you give me some feedback? Or to the point where you've told, it's a story you've told often but not recently, and you want to tell it to some friendly faces just to get it up. So anywhere in that spectrum of creating a story, people are welcome. At the Pine Hills branch of Albany Public Library on Western Avenue in Albany. And there is no storytelling open mic up at Cafe Lena on the 4th Tuesday, which happens to be Christmas Eve, and they suspected some that would exclude be low attendance for some people. So they will be back on January 28th. And just wanted to remind you, there are 3 more performances at Proctor's for word plays in January, February, and March. Kindness, Sticky Situations, and Lemons to Lemonade. You can always find stories on demand on the computer. Go to storycircle@proctors.org and click on YouTube. And you can also find these TV shows on demand. You go to storycircle@proctors.org and click on Story by Story. So we have 18 minutes left.
Wow.
So maybe we want to hear another story right away, and then we
Okay.
have plenty of time to talk about it
Okay.
without cramping your...
Cramping your style.
All right.
Yes.
So,
Can you wind us? No.
blow you away with another
Yes,
story.
yes.
Okay, so I have 3, and they're all still kind of like not as good as I would like them to be, but I'm going to tell you the story of the first flute. First flute. And it's interesting because when I was working with the musicians of Malwick, Norman was trying to figure out how he would play the flute and what flute he would play when I talk about we're doing Thanksgiving, when they're doing the naming ceremony with Elizabeth. And so we were looking up information about Native American flutes. So this story, I'll have to tell you afterwards which tribe it came from. I think it was the Lakota. But long ago, before even horses came to the continent, but when the Lakota people were still hunting buffalo, there was a young man who became very interested in a young woman in his tribe. But she didn't seem to be interested in meeting him. In fact, many men had expressed an interest in talking with her, being with her, and she didn't want to have anything to do with any of them. And this young man was rather shy anyway, so that made it even more difficult for him. Well, to take his mind off of this beautiful young woman, he decided to go hunting. After all, you could always use meat and the fur from an animal. And as he packed what he would need to be out for a little bit, he set off and came across the tracks of an elk. This was a hopeful sign so soon to run into the tracks of an elk. So he followed the tracks along. He followed it all over the level place and up into the hills and down into the valleys and deeper into the woods. Now occasionally he would get a glimpse of that elk, but never was he in a position where he could take a clear shot at it. It always seemed to disappear. And before he knew it, the day was gone and night was upon him. So he had to spend the night out in the forest, but that wasn't unusual for him to have to do that. So he made a bed of leaves and pine needles the best he could and curled up on that cold night. And he listened to the night sounds to try to take his mind off of the cold and off of the hardness of the ground. He could hear the owls hooting in the different distance. And of course, he knew which kind of owl was which. And he could hear the leaves rustling as the little animals came out in the night and made their way along. And he was just about to drift off to sleep when he heard a sound that was it wasn't singing, but it was beautiful like singing. That he'd never heard before? No, it didn't really sound like any bird, none that he'd heard. And as the night got quieter and the wind died down, he drifted off to sleep. When in the morning, when he woke up, the sun was 2 hands above the horizon. That was late for him to be waking up. But he realized right there in front of him was a woodpecker. And the woodpecker was tapping on the tree. Well, woodpeckers didn't usually get that close. He stood up, stretched, and put his bow on his shoulder and collected his belongings, and the woodpecker stayed. And as he started to walk away, the woodpecker flew with him. And then the woodpecker went in a different direction, and he realized the woodpecker was calling to him. The woodpecker, his brother, was trying to tell him something important. He thought about getting back to the village and getting some food, but he realized he must be on some kind of a mission, and he followed the woodpecker through the woods, and they really didn't have to go too far till they came to a dead tree. Now, when most of us look at trees, we say, oh, that's a lovely tree because it has beautiful spreading branches and lots of leaves that are green or in the fall maybe colored. Or maybe the tree has beautiful green, long pine needles, or maybe short green needles. This tree had long ago lost most of its branches and all of its leaves. But there were some branches sticking out, and there were holes in the branches, holes that probably Brother Woodpecker had pecked. And then the wind came up. And he heard that sound again. This was it, the source of the beautiful song. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't people singing. It was the wind coming through this piece of wood. He climbed up the tree and managed to break off that branch with the holes in it. And he spent the day trying to make that sound again. And he held it up for the wind, and he ran with it, and he blew on it, but nothing he could do could get that beautiful sound again. It was disappointing because that sound was so lovely. He knew that all his people would want to hear it too. Well, he stayed away from the village for 4 days. He didn't eat. He walked and he fasted. And on the 4th night, he laid down to sleep. And that night, the woodpecker came to him in his dreams. And in that dream, the woodpecker showed him what he needed to do to that piece of wood, to a piece of wood. He woke up in the morning completely inspired, and he went and got a branch, and he hollowed out the center of it, and that took some patience. And the end of it had to look like the open mouth of a bird. And then he made little holes along the branch. And then he took it and he held it to his mouth and he blew. And sounds came out. And he moved his fingers over the holes and more sounds came out. And he practiced it until he decided that it was worthy for other people to hear. That maybe they would hear the beauty like he heard that night when the wind blew the branch. It was night when he made his way back to where the teepees were. And he went to the teepee where that beautiful young girl lived. And he stood a little ways away, and he began to play his flute. And it was a beautiful, sweet song. Really, a song with an invitation to come, come. The tent flapped open, and out she came. She saw him standing there in the night with his blanket wrapped around him, playing. He knew she was there, but he didn't look. He didn't want to make her do anything she didn't want to do. She came toward him with a very soft, sweet smile on her face. She lifted the robe off of his shoulder, wrapped it around her, and stood next to him while he continued to play. And that's how we came to have the first flute, and that's how this young man and this young woman came to be man and wife. The end.
Thank you.
So that story came from a series of books. I think that one was The Keepers of Life, written by Michael Caduto and Joseph Bouchat. You may know Joe.
No,
Yes.
Joe.
Yeah.
I've met Michael too. So, yeah, they're a great resource, and that's a great story.
I'm going to hold the book up because, gosh, if any teacher is watching, I think I had them here last time. The series of books is absolutely incredible. And people who are homeschooling, because every story comes with a follow-up guide for science lessons, lessons on relationship. It's just, and there's a pronouncing gazetteer in the back, activities. It's just a wonderful series of books. And I used to work with one of the illustrators, John Quijones Fadden. He was an art teacher at Saranac Central School.
Oh, wow.
And he and his father, John Fadden, started the Six Nation Iroquois Indian Museum up in Anchiota.
Anchiota, yes.
Yes, it's not, it's
Near Paul Smith?
it's near between Paul Smiths and Plattsburgh, off of Route 3. And completely authentic Mohawk.
And Ray Fadden and Fran Yardley, who was born in a Woody, tells the story of Ray Fadden adopting a baby porcupine.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
That's a wonderful
And how
story.
yes, yes, a scatological tale.
And
But we digress. But we have 7 minutes to talk about this, and okay, so that's the win. But at Celebration last year, you and Claire Nolan did a tandem tale. Were you the wind or the sun?
I was the sun.
You were the
because
sun,
she
right?
wanted
You were in yellow. Yes, and
She wanted to be
she was the belligerent wind.
Yes, the blustery belligerent. That's
Lusty,
gonna be-
belligerent wind, yes.
Yes, yes.
Well, you know, it's a vivid story and mellow, because the quest, the hunt, you know, you kind of describe all these things, and then in making the flute and learning to play the flute, which is, you know, and then he brings it back, and I love the way the story kind of unfolded.
Well, I think a lot of their stories, like there's one about the rabbit dance, and it's about a group of hunters going out and finding some rabbits, and there was a giant rabbit, and they stayed down low, and they didn't shoot the rabbits, they just waited and watched, and they watched the rabbits do this dance. And so they learned the dance and then brought that dance back to their people, and that's how they got to have the rabbit dance. So, and just the idea that, you know, we have such a different outlook on trees and rabbits and everything. Like, rabbits are rabbits, but in that heritage, they're like their brothers. They're really like other people. And there's not that wall that we have.
Right.
So.
Yes, I always remember that in conjunction with some Native American story, I learned that the people were keen watchers on what the animals did. And if the animals didn't eat the berries from a bush, you sure as heck shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, animals, like some animals can't eat things that humans can't, but if they don't eat it, there's a good reason, and that you should just go, yes, I take your wisdom. And in crossing a frozen body of water, follow the animal tracks.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yes, and somehow they know where the springs are coming in, and they avoid those places because the ice is unstable there.
Well, I had two more stories, and one's a little bit longer than the other, and it's but it's so funny because it's about a kid who really does a really terrible thing, but it all ends up okay. But the other one is shorter, and maybe we'll have maybe 2 minutes now.
We have 4.
4 minutes? Okay. So this is how we got butterflies, and this is from the Papago tribe in the Southwest. So, now I've forgotten what the name of the being was that was there. But it was just, he was out walking, and it was just after the rain, so the grass was green, the flowers were growing, the leaves were out on the trees, and the children were dancing and playing, and it was so beautiful, and he felt it and he smelt it, and it was just one of those glorious days that just, you take in with all your pores. And suddenly he was struck with a sadness because the day would be over and this feeling might be gone. And as he walked along, some yellow leaves danced up with the wind. And he walked along and he realized more yellow leaves were dancing up with the wind. But then when the wind died down, they were gone too. He thought, well, maybe I could create something that would remind me of this day and dance in the wind like those leaves did, but we wouldn't need the wind. So he took his sack and he went around and collected as many colors as he could. He collected the yellow cornmeal, or the yellow pollen and the white cornmeal. He collected green pine needles, pink petals from flowers, anything that had a beautiful color. He took and he put it in his bag. He took this bird's song and put that in his bag too. And he went and he called all those children who were out there playing, come, come. Well, when this great person in their family said to come, of course they ran over and wondered what was going on. And he said, I have something for you today, something that will make you remember when the rains have come and turned the grass green and the leaves green and brought the flowers to us. I think you will like it, but I'm not sure. And you won't need the wind to make it fly. He opened the bag up, and out came orange and black butterflies, yellow and black butterflies, blue butterflies, yellow butterflies, all the butterflies with all the colors in the world that he had collected. And the children danced and jumped around as the butterflies fluttered among them. And they sang their beautiful songs. But the birds came along. They said, this is not right. You have given us the birds. And you gave us the song, and now you've given it to the butterflies. Well, he realized he had done the wrong thing to take the songs from the birds. He gave the songs back to the birds, but kept the beautiful butterflies that can dance in the wind or dance as if they were flying in the wind. The end.
Very nice. Beautiful visual images there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the way the creator gathered things into his bag and they became butterflies.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so if you're working with kids, you could think, well, what could you gather? And it can't be man-made. What could you gather to put in the bag? What would you bring to put in to help? Maybe he could have even said that to the children. Mm-hmm. Maybe if I told it again, I would have that. And one would bring cornmeal, and one would bring yellow pollen. So that was a little more interactive. So.
Yes.
But we have interacted enough for today. And so we have to say goodbye to you.
Goodbye. Thank you for being here with us and for entertaining us and for bringing a little awe. That was really great.
Well, thanks for all you do for storytelling, for storytellers, and for people who crave storytelling experience.
Well, thank you for that.
Well, we are ambassadors for storytelling. And thank you for joining us. And we hope you'll come back again.
And we hope to see you at one of our programs over the next couple of months. Much good cheer.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning